thing about Merthyr Tydfil is the people who live here who are fantastic, wonderful sense of humour.
The best thing about Merthyr Tydfil is the shops, because there's always a sale on.
If Merthyr Tydfil was a type of car, it would be a larder, because it's nice and cheap and it's not pretentious.
A Vauxhall Chevette that is easy to fix and needs pushing, yeah.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Mark Steele's in town. And this week I'm in Merthyr Tydfil, in the Myfanwy Theatre in Merthyr Tydfil College, in this solid industrial town in South Wales, an area that I should just explain to everyone listening that this is the valleys. It's not the bit of Wales where it's a bit dangerous, if you're English. It's not quite that bit. Those bits a little bit further north where you go in those places and there's just people going, oh, go on, get out. Go on, Englishman, don't like you, no reason. No reason, just get out. I tell you what, you've ruined our language, that's why we don't like you. You know, there's some people in Cardiff now, they don't know the meaning of the word. It's not one of those places. This has puzzled me, right, because there's a special Channel 4 here, isn't there, that's all in Welsh. And it puzzles me, because you can't have Countdown on there, can you? This wouldn't make sense, would it? I'll have a consonant, please. And another consonant, please. Another consonant, please. I'll have 5 more consonants, please. I'll have a consonant, 9 consonants, 4 consonants and a consonant. I got a 14-letter word. It's a type of squirrel. But none of that here, because this is friendly. This is Merthyr Tydfil friendly. The strong sense of community in Merthyr Tydfil and of toughing things out together. Why, there's a popular website, for example, which I think sort of sums up the attitude, a positive way of many people around here. It's called Merthyr's a Toilet, but we love it. That's a good thing. And there's various comments on there. There's one that I liked, which was, I'm excited. I've heard Merthyr's getting a Nando's. Good to be positive. So this is a town with lots of hills, lots of old housing estates and industry, some of which has shut down and left people unemployed. But it's also a town noted for its love of boxing and its boxing champions. So in other words, I know life's hard here, but we know how to lighten up as well by punching each other's heads. To put it another way, I don't think that Merthyr is the sort of place that you would come to set up a feng shui business, is it? I read a really sweet little book called Sporting Highlights of Merthyr Tydfil, and there was a chapter called Swimming and Water Polo in the 1950s. So, can you imagine a more innocent subject? And then the bloke writing it writes about a race up the River Taff, and he says, my most vivid memory of the day is being overtaken by a little girl of no more than 10 years of age. As she was being towelled down by her proud parents, she gave me the sweetest of smiles. Had there been fewer witnesses, I'd have drowned the brat. But at least you're proper tasty here in Merthyr. You're not like Cardiff. Soft Cardiff with its fancy opera houses and its waterside developments. As a Londoner, you see, I have to say we were humiliated constantly by Cardiff, so I come at it from a different angle from you, because we tried to build a football stadium and couldn't manage it. It's humiliating every single year. Hello, Cardiff, yeah, can you put another cup final on? We're putting a pitch in upside down. I don't know how we managed it. You'll have to... And of course, they loved it in Cardiff. Oh, yeah, we'll build a stadium, right, because we're hard, not like you ponces in London, right? Because we don't mind running around playing rugby and getting all mud up us and everything, right, because we're hard. So we'll build you a stadium, but we'll put a roof on it because we don't want to get wet. So, now, what I am amazed about with Cardiff when you come to Merthyr Tydfil is it's only about 25 miles away. And the reason that's amazing is that if you come by train, it takes a month to get there. On a Reaver train, on this chuggy little train that's like Ivor the engine, that creaks and creaks, and you can almost hear it going, oh dear, oh, I'm not good as another hill, I can't manage it. Oh, you walk on without me, I'm just a burden. But now, here's the amazing thing, and this astonished me when I was reading about the town. Merthyr created modern Wales. Cardiff would be nothing without you. And I was astonished about this. Like, Merthyr started off as a little hamlet, but then from 1750 to 1850 went from just this tiny little village to being bigger than Cardiff and Swansea put together. And in fact, at the start of the 19th century, this was the town that grew quicker than anywhere in the world because of the iron and the coal to the south. And people moved over here from all over Britain, from all around the rest of Wales. In the early part of the 19th century, 2,000 Spaniards moved over from Bilbao, which must have made for some interesting bullfighting. I would have thought once they'd learnt the Merthyr ways. Goad the beast with a keepsy. Come on, beastie, goad, goad, goad. Here he comes, he's right in sight. Here he comes, jab right between the arms. I sorted you out, now let's go and have some tapas, see? So Merthyr was really 4 places, each revolving around one of the ironworks. I'm bound to pronounce these wrong. Dowlais, Cyfarthfa, Plymouth and Penydarren. Is that about right? Penydarren. OK, sorry. And they're all sort of still a little bit distinct, each area, I think. For example, Dowlais is amazing, I think, because it's only a mile away, and it's probably the only place in the world where they would say, "Oh, you're from Merthyr, are you? There's posh." Don't suppose you want to hang around here then, Your Majesty? Somehow, within 50 years of the ironworks being set up, the town became Welsh-speaking, and by the 1830s, Welsh was the main language. The spread of Welsh was associated with radical ideas, because this was a period in the early 1800s when the ideas of democracy and rights for the poor were part of a movement for a new sort of nation. The ideas that came to prominence in the American Revolution, the French Revolution. 5 of the signatories to the first American Constitution were Welsh. Loads of people in South Wales supported the French Revolution. So the growth of Welsh was encouraged by people who wanted a new nation along these lines. So how many people here speak Welsh then? Yes! Is Delith here? You're Delith? Right, so Delith, you go to a Welsh-speaking school, yeah?
Yeah, I go to Ysgol Gavin Divine.
Well, that's... I'd be happy at the end of the first year if I could say that, I think. Do you use this sometimes, like in the town, sort of to speak to each other in Welsh, knowing that other people can't?
Of course we do. What's the point if we can't talk about other people, innit?
So is there a sort of youth speak Welsh?
It's just really fashionable to speak rubbish Welsh, to be honest.
Right.
It's like, no one really wants to sound like the old people speaking Welsh, so we just, you know...
Oh, so what's the difference between Old Welsh and New Welsh, then?
Well, wrong Welsh, really. Just incorrect.
So it's changing then, isn't it? Because Welsh sort of, like, nearly died out in these sort of areas, didn't it, a while ago? 20 years ago?
Not really. It's always been alive here, man.
Eh? No, I don't mean the Welsh died out.
I mean the Welsh language. So it's been alive and kicking.
All right, I'll tell you what I'd like you to do, Delith. I would like you to say, I'm Delith and I'm from Merthyr, in Welsh, but in a French accent.
Fy enw I yw Delith, dwi'n dod o Merthyr Tydfil.
Delith McLean. That was marvellous. Merthyr seems to have this sort of combination, I think, of like this Welsh pride and working class pride from its industrial background. The Welsh historian Gwynalf Williams, who was from Merthyr, said, "I remember the day that I encountered my first Conservative, a shock all the greater in that it coincided with the crisis of puberty." That's brilliant. He discovered both meanings of the word tosser in the same day, isn't it? Now, over the last 200 years or so, that sense of working class community has made itself known through the unions, through the Labour Party, various other social clubs, sports clubs, and hundreds and hundreds of pubs. During the Industrial Revolution, countless pubs. In Dowlais at one point, 1 building in 6 was a pub, apparently. A statistic explained by the fact that the other 5 were brothels. The first secret organisations of ironworkers forming unions were in pubs. The Chartists, the organisation that first campaigned amongst the working class for the vote, met in the Three Horseshoes. The church organisations met in pubs. But there was a reason why so many pubs were built here in the first place, which is probably that the pub was just more comfortable than people's homes. Because in the 1800s, Merthyr attracted so many people so quickly, and the town was controlled in every way by the owners of the ironworks, who were known as the masters. And these people weren't really very keen on providing anything other than the most basic amenities. Most people didn't have toilets, and there was a reason for this, according to a landlord called Josiah Atkins, who said, "I do not think the people want toilets." But this was a very, very difficult place in which to be, I think, at the time. 1 in 5 babies didn't survive beyond being babies. There was a cholera epidemic. There was a typhoid epidemic. I was reading one book about the history of the town that had a chapter called Disease, Debility and Death that went through all 3 of these at some length, and then about 3/4 the way through this chapter it said, "Before moving on, we should first mention some of the darker sides of life." So this was around the time when the pub became so important in Merthyr's social life, and the most popular characters were from the pubs. There was Thomas, who was barred from the Farmer's Arms because, according to the landlord, he has an artificial limb, an iron arm, and if refused beer, he smashes the tables with it. Now, here's one thing I didn't expect. In 1839, a Welshman called Captain Dan Jones met the followers of a religious sect in Illinois. So he came to Merthyr to set up the Welsh branch of the Mormons. Now, the big problem here that I can see with setting up the Welsh Mormons is surely every time you said to someone, "We're the Welsh Mormons," they'd go, "Oh, Welsh Mormons, are you? You're allowed to marry 7 sheep at once." I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that's what people would say. But now there was a bonus for all of this, which is that in 2007, to trace his Welsh Mormon ancestry, Donny Osmond did actually come here and do an open-air concert at the castle. So did everyone here go to that?
Yay!
Just you and Donny, was it? But now, the Dowlice Choir, I believe I'm right in saying, actually sang with Donny in the gig at the castle, to just the one lady there. And Keith Morgan, Graham Clark, Perry Williams and Carl Llewellyn from the Dowlice Male Voice Choir are all with us tonight. Am I right about this? Yeah. Was Donny all right? Was he a bit of a prima donna, or how was he?
Far from it. He actually parked his car behind mine. I didn't even know he was there. Walked in behind me. There was a stack of women there in the church, screaming and shouting, and I looked round and it was him.
No, it was for you, Keith.
He came in. There was no rehearsal. We sang Moon River. And he was quite charming. He knew some Welsh words as well, basic, you know, hello and so on.
He's done more homework than me then, hasn't he? you still sing in the choir?
Yes, the 4 of us sing in the choir. The choir at the moment is down to about 60 choristers. Back in the good days, we were up in the hundreds. But,
why?
Well, it's, I suppose, gone out of fashion in many ways. Your show tonight, when that goes out, hopefully you could include a little advertisement on our part that we are really looking actively for new members, and they'd be very welcome.
Well,
because
that is the way the BBC's going with sponsorship. It is pretty much.
And
also, I was going to ask anyone else if you've got a fridge for sale or anything like that. Why do you think it is that so many Welsh men can sing more than elsewhere?
I suppose it comes to Richard Llewellyn, who wrote How Green Was My Valley, when he said of the Welsh people, they sing as the sight is in the eye.
Oh. Well, that's magnificent. That's the most biblical response I've ever had to a question. All right, well, a really big round of applause, please. Brilliant. Dowlice Male Voice Choir. Now, apart from being linked with Donny Osmond, the next most prominent part of your history is the Merthyr Rising, the biggest insurrection in British history since the Civil War. Now, does everybody here know about the Merthyr Rising? Yes! Well, that's the most enthusiastic we've had. And what seems to have sparked off the Rising, apart from the squalor and the stench and the unrelenting misery, was a system called the truck system, where ironworkers had to spend most of their wages buying stuff from the company store. And then there was a body called the Court of Requests, who could refer anybody who owed money to this company store to a bailiff, who would then take away your furniture, followed by your watch, and then your bed. And in 1831, the bailiffs went for the property of someone called Lewis Lewis. And the first thing there, I thought, so you've got Thomas Thomas, Lewis Lewis. This does show a shocking lack of imagination. The Welsh Book of Baby Name Calling will be very, oh, just give him whatever your name is already. I bet Mary Mary must have been from here, mustn't she? All the names, oh, she's ever so contrarian. And Lewis Lewis was a miner from Penderyn, and the bailiffs went to get his stuff, but the neighbours blockaded his house so that the bailiffs couldn't get in. One trunk was taken by the bailiffs, but a crowd then grabbed it back and they lifted Lewis Lewis onto the trunk to make a speech. And then the next thing, somebody threw fire bombs through the window of the president of the Court of Requests. And this was popular at the time, which I know this is an extraordinary thing to imagine when you think of, like, generally peaceful Britain, that throwing stuff through somebody's window could be approved of just because the owner of the house was seen as a greedy, heartless figure with no concern for hardship as long as he got his own massive, unfeasible, vast quarry full of bonus cash. That's unbelievable that we could imagine such a thing. But that is how angry people must have been in Merthyr at the time. At the same time, one of the ironmasters, William Crawshay, cut the wages of his miners, so people were generally very, very cross. Now, the next morning after the Lewis Lewis firebombs incident, a crowd met up near the Castle Inn, which is on Castle Street there, just opposite where the Castle Hotel is now. They set off to visit the town's bailiffs and get back all the stuff that had been confiscated over the years. For example, there's an account of Joan Jenkins, who was 62, who took her 2 sons to a bailiff's called Prothero. Even the bailiffs do it. If there was a folk group from Merthyr, it'd be called Crosby, Crosby and Crosby. But the crowd, over the course of a day, went to 100 bailiffs and pawnbrokers, and then they marched down the Brecon Road, and then the magistrates by this time had arrived and read the riot acts, but the crowd then shook a red flag in the faces of the magistrates. But as a result of this, the red flag became the symbol of the Labour movement up until this day. And by now the crowd was up to 10,000. And the chant of the crowd was, "We want cheese with our bread." Now, this is the sort of thing that confuses historians. So you've got various academics that have taken this literally and assumed that the crowd wanted cheese with their bread, as if everyone in the town was going, I don't mind the cholera, but I'm gagging for some dairy lean. And the army sent for the Swansea division of the yeomanry, who rode in on the farther side of Merthyr. And I bet, therefore, there were conversations that went, I'm not going to go and fight the yeomanry. I don't believe in insurrections. They're from Swansea. I'll get me musket. People of the town then stood on the hills above the road, and they rolled these huge rocks down onto the yeomanry as they came in from Swansea. And then they opened fire, and the commander of the troops, Major Penrice, was captured. And for 4 days, these battles went on, with rebellions in Monmouth and Neath as well. And it took that long for the army to eventually be reinforced by enough troops to recapture the town and take control. But they did charge one of the crowd's delegates, Richard Lewis, with bayoneting a soldier who hadn't been killed, and the soldier couldn't identify Richard Lewis, but nonetheless, Richard Lewis, who was also known as Dick Penderyn, despite massive protests, he was hung. They also charged Lewis Lewis, and he was deported to Australia. But nonetheless, I think the rebels didn't feel that they'd been altogether crushed. Within 2 weeks of this riot, the first modern trade unions was being formed in the town. And Dick Penderyn, incidentally, became a hero, a local hero. There's statues and that in the town. The historian Gwynalf Williams said about him, he was a hero because his was not a face above the crowd, he was the face in the crowd. The voice of Dick Penderyn was the voice of the people. There are many other characters, famous characters from Merthyr, of course. Richard Trevithick, who'd redesigned the steam engine. James Watt apparently hated him for it and said he should be hanged. And its first journey would start at the Penydarren Works, and the ironmaster Crawshay bet him 500 guineas that it wouldn't work, but it made it. And one account says, scores of onlookers followed on horseback, keeping up with the engine's sedate 5 miles an hour. And you've got to think, like, I mean, how amazing how things have changed now that Arriva trains have taken that speed down to 2. But mostly, of course, boxing. You've had a succession of boxing champions from Merthyr, Eddie Thomas, Johnny Owen, Howard Winston, who become the world featherweight champion despite having no tips to his fingers. And Eddie Thomas said at one point, when boys in Merthyr are born, they come out with clenched fists. And so, very pleased with us tonight is George Evans, who wrote this very excellent book, A Bag Full of Monkeys. And George, how would you describe your boxing prowess then? Like, what were you? Because you were Welsh champion.
Right, I started boxing when I was 7, 8 years of age. My father was a boxer, my uncles were boxers. I grew up in a boxing clan, if you like.
Why do you think there's so many boxers from Merthyr, George?
Well, it started with the Industrial Revolution. Hundreds of thousands of people came from all across the world, and they all lodged in or near Merthyr, the squalid, depressing place Merthyr was. And of course, there was friction and fighting, especially after beer. And some wise guy said at some time, well, there's money to be earned here. And he started forming shows and said, look, don't fight your mate outside the pub for nothing. Come and fight in a show and I'll pay you for it. I'll give you a pint of beer for nothing. And that's how it kicked off. People were generally depressed, and fighting was an outlet, because fighting, fist fighting, was general and accepted.
One more story I want to tell you that I found amazing in the book, which is the story of when you went to London at one point, going through Soho.
Right. Well, try and picture this. A young, naive boy from Merthyr Tydfil, from the Welsh valleys, and there I'm taken to this cafe, down some stairs, people smoking spliffs and all the rest of it. And for no reason at all, a fight broke out, and one of the gang, he got the disco lights and walked across to my mate and smashed him in his face. And I thought, oh, that's nice. But it was pandemonium. Everybody started smashing everybody else, and I thought, oh, I may as well join in. So that was it. We just had one hell of a punch-up, and the police were called, and they were running around knocking everybody with their truncheons. And, yeah, we had a bit of fun, and I did.
I quote from his book, I retaliated and hit the guy who by this time was lashing out at everybody. I then looked at my hand and saw 2 front teeth sticking out of the knuckle. Thanks very much, George. There is, of course, another famous name from Merthyr, recently departed, which is Hoover. The Hoover plant was set up in 1948, but at the end of 2008, the management announced that they might be shutting after a consultation period. And then, to everybody's surprise, at the end of that period, the place was shut. The government, I read the government needs to be careful if mass unemployment comes to Merthyr. In 1936, when there were 3 million people unemployed, they introduced the means test, which was a way of cutting unemployment pay. And in Merthyr, the means test generally went that people could go down from 15 shillings a week to 5 shillings a week. So in response, the women in Merthyr organised a march of 3,000 unemployed that went to the Unemployment Benefit Office. And when they got there, according to one marcher's account, they smashed all the windows. The police came, but they were helpless. The demonstrators went inside, pulled the stairs away, and the records were all flung in a heap. And I wonder if they then made an advert that went, benefit offices, we're closing in. This riot actually had a huge impact. It was one of the incidents that led to the new rules being scrapped. But then in 1939, a think tank called Political and Economic Planning proposed, and I swear this is a true quote, the evacuation of the whole town to the Glamorgan coast. It does not seem reasonable to ask the rest of Britain to pay taxes to give large numbers of people the doubtful pleasure of living in one of the least habitable districts of England and Wales. There's always been another feature of Merthyr, though, since the first industry year. Apart from it not being the prettiest town, you probably agree, there is a strong sense of community which is connected to the Labour movement. For a long time, the Labour Party connected so strongly to Merthyr Tydfil. The Labour Party would just win every election by so many. It was barely even worth having the election, it was said. Now, this is the sort of thing, if you was to say this to someone under the age of 35 now, they'd just look at you, wouldn't they? If you said the Labour Party was once the party that stood up for the working person against the rich and powerful. Anyone under the age of 30 would look at you as if you said something truly surreal, wouldn't they? Like you've said, you know, the Church of England started out as an aquarium. It would just make no sense at all. But the trouble is, like anywhere, Merthyr isn't just about industry anymore, because some of you will have noticed that in a discreet part of town, tastefully settled in an area that you would probably not even notice, I'm sure many of you have not even seen it's there, is a Tesco's Extra. For people not familiar with Merthyr, Tesco's Extra in Merthyr Tydfil is just this massive, huge thing in the middle of the town, this vast monument. And I did love this on the Merthyr Tydfil Tesco's website. It says, why not email your friends about Merthyr Tydfil Tesco's? Do people do that? Who's gonna, I mean, some people must be bored, but how bored would you have to be to go, oh, I'm going to send an email to my friend in Norwich. Dear Dave, do you know what we've got in Merthyr Tydfil now? A new Tesco's. It's a sort of shop where it costs £1 to hire a trolley and parents whack their kids on the back of their legs for picking up cheesy what's-it. But finally, I just want to say this about the town. I think there'd be a better way to regenerate Merthyr Tydfil. I think you should play to your strengths, Merthyr. You could get millions for this town by putting on enforced pro-celebrity boxing from the Wyndham Arms. First bout, Iron Arm, Big Nobby versus Alistair Darling. Followed by the main fight, Snarling Jimmy versus Fred the Shred Goodwin. With the commentator going, Goodwin's just made the weight, having lost £6 billion. And the crowd making it clear whose side they're on as they start to chant, cheese with our bread! Cheese with our bread! Cheese with our bread!
Cafodd sioe Mark Steele's in Town ei ysgrifennu a'i perfformio gan Mark Steele. Y cynhyrchydd oedd Julia Mackenzie.
I think people should come to Walsall because it's a very friendly town.
It's the best town in the Black Country.
I think people should come to Walsall because Baghdad's too far away.
Great market, great pubs, and people really friendly.
If Walsall was a type of car, beer, Ford Capri, it's a bit old and batty but still fast.
Probably the best thing about Walsall is the road to West Bromwich.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Mark Steele is in town. And this week I'm in Walsall at the salubrious multi-chandeliered town hall. So the first thing that we need to make clear here, this is Walsall and nothing to do with Birmingham, which is a separate place. Entirely different, about 8 miles away, and another universe altogether. It's possible, there is a theory that this is how Walsall got started, was that at one point in history a few people from Birmingham said, I'll tell you what maybe we should do to try and get rid of this accent, right? Well, a few of us march like a few miles north and a few miles west, give it about 5 generations, we might have lost this accent, you never know. And then 150 years later, blimey, did that happen? It's even worse. also, I am aware that there is a whole argument that goes on here about where exactly you are, and amongst yourselves there's some sort of debate. Are we in the Black Country? Are we not in the Black Country? The people on the sort of more industrial side say, yes, we're in the Black Country, and then there's a few people on the more posher Staffordshire side who say, no, we're not in the Black Country, because that way it adds another £10,000 to the value of our house, so we can't be in the Black Country. But I'd like to tell those people, you can't choose the region you're in like that. It's like some pretentious Geordie going, oh, no, we're strictly speaking not in Newcastle. This side of the street is Monte Carlo. You can't decide. Also, the other thing, and I've noticed this myself over the last couple of weeks, and I've said I'm coming to Walsall, this must annoy you. That you must get fed up of people when you say where you're from going, oh, Poland? That must... It's amazing how often that happens. Presumably every day you have someone come over here from Poland. Here you are, I have brought you all the post that was delivered to us by mistake. And also, because with Poles coming over here now, that must make it doubly confusing. I imagine all these conversations now between Poles and people who are from Dudley. Whereabouts are you from? Warsaw. Ah, from up the road, like? No, I'm from Warsaw. It is many miles. No, it's about 8 miles, actually, mate. I've heard of you. You have heard of us. Maybe you have heard of our ghetto. Oh, you're making posh cakes up there now, are you? Oh, funny I'd have put that on the 2 Ronnies 20 years ago. Also, I was told before I came, and I have now witnessed this phenomena for myself, I was told before I came up here that one of your most popular attractions is the concrete hippo of Walsall. This is a famous place for meeting at. Walsall people are, quite rightly, I'm told, very, very proud of the concrete hippo. And I was really looking forward to seeing this. I thought, what a fantastic, brilliant, original landmark. And I bet it's beautiful and real life-size hippo. Maybe in mid-yawn, or maybe some sculpture's done it and he's upside down in mud playing with his babies. And I saw it and it's pathetic, Walsall. It's about 3/4 of an inch long. It's a concrete gerbil. You won't get Attenborough doing anything about that hippo, will you? Here it is, if we look, this magnificent specimen. Its markings remarkably similar to a bench in Droitwich. If I'm very, very quiet, I should hear the familiar cry of its mate. Where's the hippo? They've moved the hippo. And this is the point, of course, having established itself as a meeting place in Walsall, they then moved the hippo. That's just cruel, isn't it? There's probably still people there, quite a lot of them. God, bloody hell, they've been 4 months. When are they going to arrive? There is, in fact, do you know there's a Walsall Hippo Statue Appreciation Society, which apparently has got 1,644 members on Facebook. Now, I think it is, in a way, it's quite fitting. Your most famous landmark is concrete. You do seem to like concrete round here. I don't know. Of course, I'm not saying you like concrete, but there's concrete and the flyovers, and they all seem to be everywhere. There doesn't seem to be a single part of Walsall that isn't within sight of at least one motorway. Somewhere or other. I get the impression, even if you're around someone's house and ask for the toilet, they say, you need the M5 to junction 19. But nowhere near as bad as Birmingham, I'll give you that, for just flyovers and concrete, and it's just like one giant flyover everywhere. You could never, ever justify asking anyone the directions in Birmingham at all. It's a waste of time, because they'll just go, right, well, you need to go through Bearwood, turn left at Digbeth, down the Bristol Road, go the Edgbaston flyover, round the back of Erdington, then you go up to Solihull, back through Acock's Green, through Stechford, then you need to go to Spaghetti Junction, take the 5th exit off the 9th roundabout, the 11th exit off the 14th roundabout, back through Digbeth, and you go up to New Street Station, onto the platform and get the train, because I'm good if I know the way, mate. It's just nowhere. So, but, of course, you get past all those bits that have been dumped on it, and, of course, there's all these wonderful little innovative bits about Walsall. I love the leather trade, for example. This is something you should be very proud of. I went round the leather museum there with all these sort of lovely saddles and people lovingly brushing all bits of leather. I bought a wallet there. I can't help thinking, though, that there must be some disappointed people who turn up to the leather museum.
Here we are, we're there. I hope it's as good as the one in Amsterdam.
So I want to be positive. I think I'm going to be really, really positive. I look for some positive stories about Walsall, and then I find in the paper a headline, Walsall man shoots himself with his own taser gun. Shot himself with a 1 million volt taser gun to see if it worked. I saw also that in 2002 you had an earthquake, which is very impressive, and West Bromwich didn't have an earthquake, did it? You've got an earthquake, something to be very proud of, and I bet there were people going, yeah, right, here you go, look, Ronnie, we've got an earthquake. Right, and then I saw an article in the Times that said many residents thought they were being burgled. What does that say about a place? Oh, there's only one explanation for this, we're being robbed. If there's anyone from Walsall near the tsunami when it happened, I bet they went, oh, I know this scam, they're after your wallets. So, you do need, I mean, I've come to like the place, but you need someone working on your publicity. You haven't always got the best press. There's a writer called Theodore Dalrymple, and he wrote in an American magazine, it's possible there are uglier towns in the world than Walsall, but if there are, I don't know them. It's like Ceausescu's Romania with fast food outlets. Dickens said the area was the journey's end and might be the end of everything else. It's so ruinous and dreary. What is it about writers that they're so rude about you? There's probably a story somewhere by Beatrix Potter that goes, one day Jemima Puddleduck wanted to make some delicious apple crumbles for the village summer fair, but she had no apples and had to go all the way to the woods to get some in the pouring rain. Not to worry, she smiled, at least I don't have to go anywhere near sodding Walsall. Of course, there have been many efforts to alter the town's image, such as the commission in 2000 for a sculpture of Princess Diana to go in the bus station. And, magnificently, before it was unveiled, it turned out the granite made her black. That's fantastic. The headline, Black Diana gives Her Majesty displeasure, and it was never put up. But it was ahead of its time, right? Because now, when white people want to act cool, they try to sound black. If Diana came back now, I reckon that's how she'd go. She'd go, like, as a people's princess, she'd get me in it. Also, there's this big centrepiece now, the art gallery, and it's got a lift that tells you which floor you're on, as I'm sure you all know. And the voice in the lift is the voice of Noddy Holder, which is fantastic, isn't it? Because Noddy Holder is from Walsall. But I was wondering, do other towns do this? Like in Glasgow, the Arts Centre lift got Billy Connolly going, oh, we're going up so high here. I mean, the Gloucester one has got Fred West. Now we're going to the basement, my favourite. The council doesn't always seem to want to promote Walsall as much as it should do. I've got the notes that were put out by the council about the history of Walsall, a glance at the borough's history, and it had this to say. Walsall Market. Walsall has had a market since at least 1220, when the Crown granted the Lord of the Manor to hold a market every Monday. In 1417, the Crown changed market day to a Tuesday. Bloody hell, it all happens here, doesn't it? Cool. I bet that was a momentous roller coaster 200 years, wasn't it? But of course, the difficulty you have, and this is unfair, I'm entirely on your side here, Walsall, the difficulty that you have in promoting the place to its rightful position, it seems to me, is that a lot of people are a little bit hesitant about the accent. I think this is snobbery. We know the BBC just would never allow the presenter of Newsnight to be from Walsall because they just could not imagine someone going, Minister, I'm asking you again, did you see the statement before you made the position clear in the House of Commons? And if you didn't, you're going to resign. So, I think it's brilliant, and summed up for listeners, I'm sure everybody here will know this, but summed up by the joke that I saw about the Walsall man who goes off to join the army, and on the night before the battle, the general stands up and he says, right then, men, I'm sure you didn't come here to die. And the Walsall man goes, well, I didn't, sir, I come here yesterday. And I think that sort of sums it up. Now, so, around this time in the 14th century was discovered the stuff that would eventually make this the Black Country, because apparently under the ground there was all of this limestone. Even more important, there was high-quality coal and, most importantly, iron ore, from which iron was extracted, obviously. Now, I went round a foundry, and there's some of the fine people there from Chamberlain and Hill up the road there. You are here from Chamberlain Hill, are you? Yeah! I went round there, they were lovely, but I did think when I was going round there, blimey, in an iron foundry you should be paid a fortune, even if you just sit in the place, because it's so hot and it's full of molten metal, which is to say, metal that's so hot that it's melted and become liquid, and they just pour it from one place to another like it's tea. All right, how many sugars do you want with your molten metal? And then Dave and Gordon, who were great, but Dave and Gordon were great, who sort of showed me round. They said, now, before we go around, right, whatever you do, don't touch any of the metal unless I say that it's all right for you to touch it. And I thought, well, of course I'm not going to touch it. You think I'm mental? It's molten bloody metal. Do you think I'm going to go, oh, I know it's 100,000 billion squillion degrees, but it looks so silky I can't resist it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's crazy, the place. It's not. That's why when volcanoes, they're in there doing all this stuff. And I'm thinking, no, when you see this stuff, it's on the news when there's a volcano and they go to the report and there's people fleeing. They're not just stood over there pouring it into castings and going, now don't touch the inside of the volcano unless I tell you to. The change of the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't just about the machines, as we know, it was also about a whole new way of thinking about work. Because in the 1700s, most people in industry, they worked in their own home with their own children helping them, and they had their own machines, and everything was being made for the Saturday market in their own time, so they had some sort of control, and everything revolved around the Saturday market, including marriages. And here is an account I found from the Walsall market in the 1700s. A man led his wife from a village 8 or 9 miles away and sold her in a few minutes for 2 shillings and 6pence. The purchaser was a nailer who had come in from the same village. All parties were reported to be satisfied. That still go on? But everything led to the Saturday market. And the brilliant thing, there was this whole system that grew up called Saint Monday, because the saints' days were days off. And of course the employers hated this whole business of the merchants who bought all this stuff. They hated this idea that people didn't work on the Monday. And so the Industrial Revolution was about forcing people out of this way of thinking. And of course also the obsession with productivity transformed the lives of children. One Walsall resident in 1864 was Samuel Dennill, a caster's assistant, and he gave evidence to a report that went, I was 10 last April. I have worked for about a year and a half. I come in at 6 in the morning and go every night at 7. And on Saturdays I stop to sweep. I get 2 shillings and 6pence a week. So pretty grim. On the other hand, he was earning enough each week to buy a wife. I couldn't do that when I was 10. something that might have helped shape Walsall, I think, is like the skills of the ironworkers, the foundrymen, and then later on the leather trade here, because these were skills that were all kept on right through the Industrial Revolution and beyond. Also, then the foundries started making the stirrups and the various little bits of metal that were needed by horsemen for the army, and so the leather trade grew up alongside it. And Walsall made this very high-quality leather, which it still makes, to the extent that I am informed that the Queen's handbag is made from leather from Walsall, which... did she come up here and buy it in the Saddlers' Centre? And then there's loads and loads of these trades still going on, irons, locks, saddles, and it makes a continuity with the past, I think, which sort of gives the opportunity for a sense of community. And also, I mean, this is an example. There's loads of famous people have come from Walsall. We know about Noddy Holder, Goldie, the drum and bass man, maybe Boy George comes from Walsall, though he seems to deny it. And does deny it, apparently, and I have to say that's not complimentary, Walsall, that he denies it when you think about what he's saying. Because he's saying, all right, I was a heroin addict, I accept that. But I did not come from Walsall. Bolt, the poet who wrote a famous poem about cricket and empire. The sand of the desert is sodden red, red with the wreck of a square that broke. The Gatlings jammed and the colonel dead and the regiment blind with dust and smoke. The river of death has brimmed his banks and England's far and honour a name, but the voice of a schoolboy fills the ranks. Play up, and play the game. Now, this is why poets of the empire had to be cricket fans. Because if he was a football fan, it would have ended, and honour's a name and England's afar. But the voice of a schoolboy rallies the ranks. You're shit and you know you are. Who else? Anyone else famous from Walsall? Have I missed out? Oh, right, Judas Priest. God, you like things loud here, don't you? Richard, what? It's all right, yeah, the actor. Blimey, everyone. Sister Dora, well, Sister Dora we shall come on to. I think it's a sign of community, in a sense, that despite all of these people that are around, Judas Priest and such other people, the most celebrated character in the area is Sister Dora, Dorothy Pattison. Sister Dora was brought up in Victorian Yorkshire, and she had a string of affairs, and then she became a sister of the Anglican Church, and the church trained these nurses, and she said that what she loved about this was that the hospitals consider men as men, and not just as hands to work. In 1859, the Mayor of Walsall started a fund for the town's hospital. Now, up until then, the patients from here were sent over to Birmingham. I bet you loved that, didn't you? And to be fair to Birmingham, they weren't very keen on the deal either, and the secretary of the Birmingham Hospital sent a letter to the mayor that said the hospital authorities would thank the people of Walsall to send more money and fewer patients. Sister Dora, taking the opposite attitude, came to Walsall, and this was considered a difficult place to do nursing. This is why I think Dora became a hero. She became a nurse for the poorest people in the town, and she set up schemes to improve health for beggars, for drunks and prostitutes, and she made a point of nursing the Irish, who were under attack at the time, until she said, there is hardly a poor man or woman in Walsall that I don't know personally. And she was questioned why so many patients got sick in the hospital, and she worked out that they were getting sick because of what she called hospital diseases, and she worked this out because the place was full of filth and dust, and so she organised a cleaning system that almost eliminated what was known as surgical fever. And I mean, I just think it's extraordinary when you think back to that age, how stupid that we were, not realising that if your hospitals are filthy, people are going to get sick. What were they thinking in those days? Dora's methods completely transformed, just her cleaning regime transformed the hospital, and she was helped in one way because, as one account puts it, black country dirt has one great advantage: it's visible in its gritty density. And then, in 1875, there was a huge explosion at the iron company in Walsall, and dozens of iron workers were killed or maimed, and Dora organised the treatment for the survivors, and she organised collections through the town, and she became such a hero that her picture was put up in thousands of homes across Walsall, and she became known as the civilian Florence Nightingale. And she died at the age of 46. And her statue in the shopping centre, that's now in the shopping centre there, was the first statue in Britain of a woman who wasn't in the royal family. So I can see how Walsall must have thought, how on earth do we top that? I know. We'll do a statue of a woman who was in the royal family and make her black. Also, brilliantly, Walsall, you have the most famous anarchists in British history, because in the 1890s there was a socialist club in Goodall Street, but some of the members became anarchists and they met these two Frenchmen who said they wanted to join the group. Now, straight away you would think that would arouse your suspicions, wouldn't it? That you would have someone going, as a French anarchist, what excites me is passion, protest, cuisine, romance, joie de vivre. Finding the most beautiful way to use language, which is why I come to Walsall. But the Frenchmen were then contacted by a man called Auguste Coulon, who was the leader of the anarchists. At that time, they met in Tottenham Court Road in London. And when Coulon found out that one of the Walsall anarchists, Fred Charles, worked in a foundry, he wrote a letter saying, "Then he will make do to make bombs for us." Who would actually say, "Then he will make do to make bombs for us"? Was there another sentence that went, "The fools"? And then the editor of the Walsall Anarchist newspaper wrote that, and I promise this is true, he wrote, "Coulon sent me an article celebrating the blowing up of a cow in Belgium as a great and revolutionary act." That has got to be the most magnificent sentence in English history. Blowing up a cow in Belgium. Because now it'd be straight on YouTube, wouldn't it? With thousands of kids go, "Oh, look, look, look." So, Coulon then sent instructions for making bombs to the foundry, and the anarchists never actually got round to making them, possibly because they were suspicious, possibly because they were anarchists. And the police started following members of the Walsall Socialist Club, and then suddenly the club was raided. And the police found the plans for the bomb that was sent by Coulon, and 5 of the anarchists were arrested, and they were jailed for 5 to 10 years. And there was a national campaign, although they still stayed in jail. Now, later it was discovered that the plans for the bomb that had been found, sent by this guy Coulon, was actually useless. It could never have made a bomb, so the police then altered the design to make it that it was one that would work. Who'd have thought of such a thing from the West Midlands Police? It's inconceivable. Then the only anarchist who was involved who wasn't arrested was this guy Coulon, who it turned out was a police spy all along. And so then Inspector Melville arrived to recommend him for a post teaching French at a private school for girls. So presumably he stood there all day going, "Il allume la vache Belgique," he said, "Fire." And there's a football club, Walsall Football Club, who, despite losing 5-0 at home to Bristol Rovers, can still pride itself on its most glorious moment in the 1930s, when Walsall were at the bottom of the 3rd Division South and met Arsenal in the FA Cup, who were considered utterly unbeatable by anyone, and you won 2-0 in what's been described as the biggest shock ever. And so, that's a proper football club, one that had one great day 76 years ago. There's a great thing. Apparently the players were so surprised to even get to a point where they were playing Arsenal in the first place that they celebrated beforehand by eating oysters on the pitch. Now, that's a fantastic British sporting attitude, isn't it, right? We've got no chance, so we'll celebrate beforehand. The trouble is, I think, with so many places in Britain now, Every decade, these people come along and they plonk their thing of the time on top of it, like the tower blocks of the 60s or the ring roads of the 70s, and then the pedestrianised precincts of the 80s, and then the multiplex places with the retail parks of the 90s. And it all, bit by bit, just crowds out all the little brilliant things that are going on underneath. And the skills and the individuality and all this joy of the place, I think, is threatened again now, this time because of the banking system, and that's crashed. So for some reason, that means that the men at Chamberlain Hill are all on a 3-day fortnight, and the illuminations have been cancelled for the first time in 50 years. And so this is the spirit that you have in a town like this, is the spirit, I believe, that caused Henry Newbolt, who wrote Play Up and Play the Game, to write another lesser-known verse that I discovered to his poem. And I'll just finish with this, Walsall. The air of Walsall is sodden black. Black as a country whose heroes called Dora. Black as a statue it had to send back. Black as a night it can't light now it's poorer. Where saddles are smooth and iron clanks, and anarchists jailed though no bomb plot was proved, and a voice of a schoolboy fills the ranks. We can't meet in Walsall, the hippo's been moved. Thanks very much.
Mark Steele's in Town was written and performed by Mark Steele, and the producer was Julia Mackenzie.
You should come to Dartford because Blue Water's up the road, and you can come and see the M25, and that's amazing at rush hour. It's a really good thing to come and see.
The park, the schools are excellent. There's a great butcher's. There's wonderful sausages.
Mick Jagger was from Dartford, so that makes it good.
If Dartford was a 3-course meal...
For a starter, it'd be McDonald's. For a main course, KFC. And for afters, I think definitely a kebab.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the second series of Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from the Mick Jagger Centre in Dartford, which for those people, if there can be any such people that don't know, Dartford is along the Thames, sort of past where the EastEnders map goes, out east of there, and just into Kent. It must be very confusing growing up here, I think, because you're near the hard bits, but it's next to rural Kent. And it must be confusing. That's why you get kids on bikes hanging around in the pedestrianised precincts, trying to look like they're in the city, kids, but not quite managing it, going like, listen up, like we as a river Darrant massive, innit, you know. This is my manor blood. You don't diss this round here, because this is an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's a funny progression along the sort of south of the Thames as you go out of London. First of all, you get, hi, I'm Greenwich. Put my bonus into buying a couple of flats at 100k, sold them for 5 mil, bought a crematorium, converted it into flats, lost a lot in the credit crunch, got it all back off the government plus a tip, decided to buy Bulgaria. And then you come a little bit further out and it's, hello, I'm Blackheath. There is, of course, a regulation here that nobody is permitted to reside within the parish boundaries unless they can prove that for at least 9 generations they have attained the rank of Admiralty. And then you just go over the hill and down the other side. Hello, I'm Thamesmead. Oi, Greenwich, I see your pretty boat burnt down. And then you get to Dartford, which is not London, but it's probably fair to say that it's not what most people think of Kent being, the sort of Garden of England-y type of bit of Kent. There is a quaint charm, clearly, to the town, which has made it a subject for poets. There's an old poem about the area that's in a number of the history books, quoted by a chap called Edward Creasy, written in 1857, and it's about the sort of the trades of the local areas, the villages around Dartford and Dartford itself, and it goes like this. Sutton for mutton, Horton for beef, Southdown for gingerbread, Dartford for a thief. Edward Creasy, 1857. Also, Dartford gets a mention in a delightful little book that I found at the Blue Water Centre, which I'll be mentioning later, called Who's Buried Where in Kent? And there's like Henry IV's in Canterbury and Malcolm Campbell's in Chislehurst. And for round here, it says, Big Tony, shallow grave, Farningham Woods. Now, I should declare fairly early on a historical connection of my own in Dartford, because I was brought up in Swanley, which is about 4 miles away, which is a hugely popular neighbouring town. But to us, you were the big city. Dartford was like, wow, we're going over to... You were San Fran bloody Cisco to us. When I was 12, wow, imagine living in Dartford. They've got a co-op. It must be amazing. Because Swanley has got nothing. It is very difficult to emphasise the extent of the nothingness that Swanley has got. You'll get people from Guildford or Bournemouth or something that will say, oh, yeah, I'm from a place similar to you, nothing much. You think, no, you've got, like, pubs and things and a post office. We've got nothing. Going up to someone from Swanley and saying, yeah, I'm from a similar place is like going up to Nelson Mandela and saying, I've had hassle from the old Bill myself. I know exactly how you're feeling. Some of you might know the comedian Linda Smith was from Erith, which is sort of about the same distance going upriver. And after she died, I saw a quote from her where she said, I often had arguments with Mark Steele about which was more horrible, Erith or Swanley. I put up a good fight for Erith, but in my heart I knew he was right. But we were dazzled when we came over here. I know these pubs, there's 40-something pubs even in the centre of Dartford, and we had 2, which includes the Lulling Stone, which is suicide. Going in there, it just is suicide. These people who go all the way to Switzerland are wasting their money. Just go to Swanley, go in the Lulling Stone, go, I'm not from round here, that'll do it. But Dartford is prettier than I remember it. You've got a dainty bridge here and the River Darrant and a park in the middle of the town and little boards in the high street telling you stuff like Dixon's is built on a site of great historical interest. And the planners have done that thing that they do to everywhere, ripping up the streets and shoving in retail parks and concrete underpasses and junctions with 11 sets of lights, so you're driving through trying to get just there, but there's no way of getting anywhere without being forced down a slip road that takes you to the Matalan car park, and there's no way of getting out of there without reversing through the checkout. And that's the first thing that anybody arriving by train sees of Dartford now, is they come down those stairs and then they're 50 yards away from the town centre, but to get to it you have to cross this dual carriageway with traffic going in 17 different directions in front of you. So crossing the road is like some bloody computer game, and you have to watch everybody else and see how they're getting on and go, hang on, he's experienced, he seems to manage it, that poor old dear's been squashed by the 477 at Orpington. And if you do manage to get across that bit that then takes you to a little bit of a shrub behind a fence that... you then get across another one and then you're at the back of the bins in the Orchard Theatre. And you expect a big voice to come out from somewhere saying, you have completed the first part of your task. But to reach the centre of Dartfordius, you must navigate your path past the 3-headed dog. The other problem, of course, with the town centre is that everything has moved up to Blue Water, this huge shopping centre that's 2 miles up the A2. So when I was walking around here, I passed the cinema where I saw Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Papillon and such things in my youth. And it was shut down, which was quite sad. But then it turns out there's no cinema here in the town at all, because there's one at Blue Water with 5 million screens in it. And the record shop where I bought the first Clash album is gone, because now if you want a CD you have to go to Blue Water. And I said to someone, is West Hill Hospital still here? Oh no, that's gone. And I thought, oh, don't tell me now. You have to go to the Blue Water Cardiac Complex between Gap and Clinton Cards. And if I go round someone's house and ask where the toilet is, they'll say, oh no, we haven't got a toilet here now, you've got to go to World of Turds at Blue Water. you must be used to blue water by now, but it isn't natural. If you ever do in your life descend down a pass between cliffs into a vast subterranean glass world, it should be because you've been commanded to serve an evil villain who's about to take over the world unless he's stopped by Doctor Who, not to buy a pair of sodding underpants. But when I went down there for a day, and it seemed all right at first. I wandered about and I had a milkshake in Ed's Diner, and there was clothes and more clothes and more clothes, and I thought, well, this is not so bad. And then the extraordinary thing that I found was, despite there being tons and tons and quarry loads of clothes, the thing I needed, which was a pair of jeans for me 13-year-old son, I just couldn't get. So I found myself just walking round and round and desperate for anything, and going into River Island and Gap and, do you please do any jeans for 13-year-old boys? And everywhere it's, no, I mean, we do jeans up to the age of 11 for boys, but the next size up is Russian heavyweight boxer. So what do people think of blue water? Is there a sort of divide? Some people like it, or do you all think it's horrible? That's not that enthusiastic, is it? Do you all have to go to it now? Yeah. For anything? And that's a nuisance, is it? Yeah. Does anybody like it at all? Yeah. I don't want to stick with stereotypes here, but I couldn't help noticing a certain male-female divide. Do you know there's a chaplain? They've got their own chaplain there. And they've got a place of peace and quiet in the Blue Water shopping centre, which is situated between Pret a Manger and the Carphone Warehouse. Do you think that's what the good Lord was thinking of when he put us here? If I'd known there was a chaplain, I would have gone and seen him that day and gone, you ain't got any jeans, have you? As well as the A2 to blue water, throughout history it seems to me that the most important part of Dartford has been the route out of Dartford. Watling Street, the famous road that the Romans built, obviously fits that description. Dartford was the first major stopping point for pilgrims on the way from London to Canterbury to worship at the shrine of Thomas a Becket, murdered in the cathedral in the 12th century. Dartford's position between Canterbury and London did make this one of the most important towns in Britain at one of its most important moments in 1381. Because that was the year of the rebellion known as the Peasants' Revolt, led by Wat Tyler, who marched his army through Dartford, and it's claimed by much of Dartford that he came from this town. There's a beautiful old pub called the Wat Tyler that has a plaque saying "Home of Wat Tyler" outside, which seems plausible because it looks very old, except for the fact that it turns out it was built 25 years after he died. According to the accounts of the revolt of 1381 that are written by Dartford historians, Wat Tyler lived in Dartford and started the revolt following a visit from a taxman who was vicious to his own daughter. But strangely, I can't find very much written by anybody else that confirms this, so I can't help thinking it's one of those things that local historians do. And there's probably other bits like, oh, you know Mozart, he was from Northfleet. He got sacked from the cement works because he kept spending all day writing minuets. Christopher Columbus, he's from Erith. It's where he got started. He discovered Essex. For him, everyone thought if he went over there, he just fell off the edge of the earth. Well, Dartford was definitely a major part of the revolt that erupted mostly in Kent and Essex. Now, strangely, the episode that led to peasants and tradesmen feeling more confident in defending themselves was the Black Death that had happened a few years before, the plague that wiped out a third of the population. But this meant that after the Black Death, there was a shortage of labour. So now the poor would travel from one parish to another, which was illegal, and work for whoever paid them the most. The problem for the monarchy was that it had bankrupted itself with wars against the French, as usual. So to raise money, they introduced a poll tax to be paid by every person over the age of 15. And if there was a dispute about whether a child was eligible, an inspector could decide by looking to see if they had pubic hair. And if they did, then they had to pay. So the common people, as a result of this, tradesmen as well as peasants, were clearly furious about this, but also they were more inclined to make a fuss now, given their improved bargaining position with the labour shortage. To start with, the whole village of Brentwood in Essex chased the tax collectors back to London, and then the villagers crossed the river here to Dartford to advise everybody here to do the same. So there was a chap called Abel Kerr, apparently, who was from Erith, and Kerr then set about recruiting commoners to an army, using farm tools as weapons, and they drove a senior judge out of the county. Kerr's army was based in Dartford, but they then captured Rochester Castle, they went on to Maidstone, and it's this point, really, after Maidstone, that Wat Tyler sort of emerges as the leader, and he led this battalion of peasants and tradesmen to Canterbury, and then he announced that as the Archbishop there was supporting the king, the Archbishop was a traitor and the people would elect a new one. And now, you think 600 years later, imagine how absurd even that sounds, even now, the idea of electing the Archbishop of Canterbury. How would that work? To vote for the Bishop of Durham, ring 086 or 4. For the Bishop of York, 086 or 5. Or for Peter Andre, 086 or 6. At Southwark, the gates were opened up for the rebels by sympathetic Londoners, and Tyler's army met up with the peasants from Essex, and they captured the prison at Fleet Street, and they released the debtors, and they burnt down the Savoy Palace, owned by the king's brother. And the person they did trust, though, was the king himself, Richard II, who, apart from anything else, was 14. So the 14-year-old king agreed to meet Wat Tyler and his army at Mile End, and the king promised the peasants that he was sympathetic, and they arranged to meet again, but it was a trap, because this time when they met, the mayor of London, a chap called William Walworth, came forward with a dagger and killed Wat Tyler. Dartford now claims Wat Tyler as an ex-resident. Even at my junior school in Swanley, where the classes were named after people with a local connection, we had a Tyler class. But Maidstone also says that he's from there, Colchester does, Deptford does. There's something heartening, I think, about the way all these towns go. No, the bloke who led a peasant army that burnt down buildings and rampaged across London and beheaded aristocrats came from here. And there's something heartening about that. Another person who had trouble travelling through Dartford was Jane Austen. She apparently came here. She wrote a letter from the Bull and George Hotel when she stayed here on the way to Rochester, complaining that the transport company had accidentally sent all her luggage to Gravesend. And this incident presumably must have been the one that inspired the passage in Pride and Prejudice that goes, "I regret, Mr. Darcy, that the whereabouts of my precious baggage eludes me, for it was dispatched by an errant travel clerk. Furthermore, I cannot reach this town's centre, for I have already witnessed attempt to cross the causeway by one unfortunate soul who was instantly crushed by the 477 stagecoach bound for Orpington." There's a romantic... I think there's a sort of romantic, seedy side as well to Dartford in Victorian times. There was regular prize fighting on the marshes. Lady wrestlers would challenge. Any lady of Dartford, £5 if they cannot be overpowered in 15 minutes. And in brackets, competition not open to ladies from Swanley. And there was a Reverend... this is one of my favourite characters from Dartford history. A Reverend Edward Edmonds, who was appointed headmaster of the grammar school in 1851, but was sacked because when he was appointed, he immediately went to bed with many bottles of gin and brandy for several days. I'll send me kids to that school. Fantastic. William Cobbett, the radical journalist, was asked what he thought of Kent around this time, and he said, I quote, "After you leave Dartford, it becomes excellent." But, to be honest, any town can point to sort of certain elements in its history that make it look hard, but here's the one that gives Dartford something extra, I think. In 1908, the Salvation Army Band wanted to play in a part of the market called the Bull Centre, and they were told that they couldn't. So the Salvation Army Band stood their ground, a fight broke out, 3 people were imprisoned, and the front page headline in the following week's war cry said, "Battle for the Bull Centre." That's when a town's hard, when the Salvation Army is going, "Come on then! You want some of the Christian soldiers, you slags?" We're hard, we're mean, we've got a tambourine. But there is, though, another side to the history of this area that I somehow missed completely while I was being brought up round here, which is the connection it has with gypsies. Now, I do remember that there were settlements in the fields at the back of Swanley, where the M25 is now, but I came to think that that was just sort of normal, that every town had a few gypsies out the back, you know, the way everything that you do, you think everybody else does it when you're a kid. Like, I remember the first time I went round a mate's house when I was about 9, and they had pudding with a fork, and I thought, what? Ugh, you're weird. And it was like that. I remember going to Brighton and thinking, well, where do you keep your gypsies? I regret now that I never made any contact with them, but when I moved away, I realised that there were little bits of gypsiness that had found its way into my world without me realising, like people called each other chav, way back before it became the sort of word with its current meaning, because that was a gypsy word for mate. And at school, we had a pudding, as I'm sure most of you know, called gypsy tart, made from evaporated milk and sugar, and it's the sickliest, sweetest recipe ever. I bet even wasps go up to it and go, zzz, oh, that's too much. Apparently, the first Romany settlements, I found out, were set up here around sort of this area of Kent in the 1500s, and from then on, travellers would come to Kent to work on the hop farms and pick vegetables, and then eventually in the 1940s there were 1,600 gypsies living on Belvedere marshes on the edge of the town by the Thames. So there's a bit of me there that thinks, hang on, you're travellers. By nature, you travel, which means you could go anywhere in the world. What made you look at an atlas and go, Belvedere Marshes looks nice? But for all the reasons you can imagine, all the myths about gypsies stealing things and not washing and their horses galloping everywhere flew about, and there were protests against them, and shops and pubs had put up signs saying no gypsies. Even in 1983, John Wells, the MP for Maidstone, said there is a vicious cycle of gypsies not attending school and breeding. What a fantastic excuse that is for not going to school. Wish I'd thought of that. Why weren't you here yesterday, Steele? It's breeding, sir. Time of year. The most famous part of Dartford of all, of course, though, has got to be another route out of Dartford. The crossing. Originally there was a tunnel, and then in the 1980s came the bridge, where you cross the Thames properly under giant winding suspending monuments to engineering, not some wimpy piece of balsa wood like London Bridge. And the people in control of it are obviously absolutely determined that everybody appreciates the full majesty of this structure, which is why they've organised it so that you have to queue for 5 hours to cross it, to give you ample time to take in its grand magnificence. There's a website for people to make comments on the crossing, and it's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of moaning. Nick of Caterham writes, the Dartford crossing sums up everything that's wrong with this country. It really is the road to hell. It's no wonder some people here are jealous of the gypsies. They set off in a caravan and get right across to Europe. You set off in a shiny black Audi and can't even get across the bridge out of town. The first time you get stuck in this, you think there must be a reason for it. There must be some huge thing that's happened, like there's a dinosaur on the loose or something. Or toxins from the power plant have created a school of giant piranhas who've eaten the bridge or something. And then you get to where the problem is, and it's just that there's the toll. You're stuck in this endless queue because everybody has to stop and pay the toll. Now, when the bridge was built, the government promised the £1 toll would only be in place until the building of the bridge had been paid for, and then it would be scrapped. And then in 2004, the initial cost had been paid off, and as promised, the £1 toll was scrapped. And and replaced with another one of £1.50. It wouldn't be so bad if there was an alternative, but there's nothing. There's no trains, no ferry. They should have a zip wire. But the most successful international export from Dartford is in the name of this building, obviously, because this is the town that gave the world Keith Richard and Mick Jagger. Jaggers wouldn't stand a chance in Dartford now, I don't think, if he came in now. He'd just be going, which way's the town centre? How do I cross the road? I've been mowed down by a 423 to Longfield. The Jaggers, because this surprised a lot of people, I think, who don't live around here. The Jaggers lived in Wilmington, didn't they, which was the villagey end of the town. And Mick, of course, came to Dartford Grammar, the school that this theatre is attached to, and Mick played at the Railway Hotel in 1958. And I bet everybody here claims to know him in some way. I bet everyone's got, his cat used to crap on my cousin's path. I bet there's that everywhere. People go, Angie, that's about my Auntie Angela who worked in the paper mill. Wild Horses is about the night the gypsies' horses broke free down Shepherd's Lane. Street Fighting Man is about my mate who drinks down the Lullingston. And You Can't Always Get What You Want is about trying to buy boys' jeans in Bluewater. And the bit that confused me as well, the Mick Jagger Centre is in part of Dartford Grammar School. How do they keep discipline here, then? Does the headmaster go, I am ashamed to announce that pupils from this school have been caught drinking alcohol, taking drugs, partying to all hours, fornicating, and generally besmirching the good name of the Mick Jagger Centre. I thought it'd be brilliant to get someone who's got some sort of